All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at a really brief introduction to algebra. So I just want to kind of get you familiar with rearranging equations. I know you've done it in the past. It might not seem very familiar to you. You might be a little bit nervous about it. Just so you know, you will not do a lot of rearranging equations in Math Essentials. But it does get us thinking about how the numbers work together. And by doing a little bit of algebra before we dive into our geometry, it's going to let us use geometry to find some other numbers. Okay, so I want you to get just a kind of a brief overview of what happens in algebra, just a refresh of what you would have learned. I'm guessing junior high is when you would have done most of these pieces. That may be a long time for some of you. And even if you just graduated school last year, that's at least 3 years away. So you may have forgotten some of those basic pieces. So try to work with me. The easiest way to do this is to actually solve the questions as you go. And for this section, I'm going to have you snap a picture and submit it into Dropbox for the final assignment, but I will have a little practice one up on SAM as well that's just a little bit shorter. So you're going to basically get 2 assignments out of 1 lesson, and hopefully that will get you in a good spot for knowing how to work with algebra. All right. So first we're going to start with some really easy questions. But before we do that, I'm going to make a couple of notes here for you to help you remember. So one of the most important things about algebra is you need to balance the equal sign. I have a hard time writing and talking at the same time, sorry. So we're going to balance the equal sign. I always like to think of it as keep it fair, okay? If we use those terms, sometimes it helps us to understand what's going on. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of think of undoing the math. So when you think about undoing the math, we're going to think about backwards order of operations when we get to those multiple step questions. So this first question is x plus 2 equals 10. I'm going to guess most of you, without doing any algebra, could tell me what the answer to this is. That's good because that means you should understand the algebra that goes with it. I want to know what x is. I have x plus 2. To undo this math, I need to subtract by 2. Whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, we're going to do to the other. So subtracting 2 on this side, I subtract 2 on this side. Now, I keep things lined up this way because it helps to keep those numbers organized. Plus 2 minus 2 goes to 0. 10 take away 2 leaves me with 8. And on this side, I have x plus 0, which is just x. X equals 8. Now you can substitute that into check. 8 plus 2 equals 10. You probably knew it was 8 before I did the math, but I need you to be able to put those numbers in and solve them even when it's not, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is, quickly off the top of your head. So when you have addition, you're going to undo the math by subtracting. And when you have subtraction, we're going to undo the math by addition. But remember, here we're making what I would often call a 0 pair. So you're basically, there's a couple terms we can use for it. Sometimes we call it combining like terms when we move the numbers all to the same side, and you'll see that come up in a slide or two. Okay, but we're basically do whatever you need to do in order to make the numbers on the one side go down to a 0. So you only have x and 0 numbers, if that makes sense. You'll see once we get a couple in, and you'll have a few practice ones, and on the practice ones I've shown my workout for them, not just giving you the final answer. So I think that will help. Now let's look at this one. So here we had addition. In this question, 6x equals 24. Now this is the same as saying 6 times x. We often don't write that times in because it gets confusing. So 6 times x equals 24. How do you undo multiplication? Well, we undo multiplication with division. The easiest way to do that is to show it with a fraction line, and then we'll just put it in our calculator. 6 on the top and a 6 on the bottom. You know that if you saw 6 over 6 as a fraction, that's equal to 1. So that means we can cancel these out and it leaves us with 1x left. That's why we do that. So now we have x equals 24 over 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So x equals 4. I've written that out maybe in more steps than I need to. You wouldn't necessarily have to write this step. I just did that. So hopefully it's a little easier for you to see. So we have x equal to 4. So we have undone multiplication. So this just means multiply. We actually call this 6 a coefficient. It tells us how many x's there are. So that means multiply. So we undo multiplication with division. We're going to have a couple more. So I think you're going to be okay with them. I'm going to throw in 2 steps this time because 1-step ones they get boring really quickly. This might get boring fast enough. So for this question, we've got a 2-step question. Now they might not look like 2-step questions to start, but they will be. First thing to notice is we have 36 and we're taking away x. Unfortunately, we can't take away 36 on this side because if we did, we would still be left with a minus x. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for x, not minus x. Because what would happen if I take away 36? Well, let's try it. So that's what we did on the other side. We said, well, let's take away 36 to make this go to a 0. We would have 0 take away x equals 21. Well, 0 take away x is not going to be equal to x. That doesn't work mathematically for us to give us just x. So this can't stay. So we're going to clear that. We'll get rid of all of our ink and we're going to start this one again. All right, let's go back. Oh, I'm getting blinded by the sun here in my kitchen. All right. So let's figure out, well, what do we need to do now? Well, this is a takeaway x, and I want to know how much is plus x or a positive x. So let's move the x to the other side. We're going to add x to both sides of the equation. Now I have 36 equals 21 plus x. I can move the 21. We can move it over to the 36 side. And for you guys, typically we're going to avoid negative numbers. Now, every once in a while we'll get one in there, and that's okay to have one sometimes. But most of the time you're going to have a positive answer or you'll always have a positive x when you're done. So kind of keep an eye out for them. This one's a little bit tricky. So let's move our 21 to the other side. Subtracting 21 from both sides. This goes to 0. And we're left with x. 0 plus x, that's just x. That can be x. 0 take away x is not x, but 0 plus x is x. I'm not sure if that sounds more confusing than it really is. And then 36 take away 21 leaves us with 15. So 15 equals x. Now one way to check our answer, let's do a check. So easy way to check your answer for these questions is we're going to put 15 where the x is. 36 minus, I always put what I'm substituting in brackets. It's just a way for me to keep track of what was there already and what I substituted in, equals 21. 36 take away 15 is 21. So 21 equals 21. We've done it right. Okay, so that's just a quick check. You don't have to check, but it can be helpful. All right, so we have negative x, make negative x to positive. Okay, make negative x a positive x before you keep going. Again, you're not going to see a lot of those. Most of the ones we're going to see are the multiplication division kind. If we look over here, 3x minus 9 equals 21. 3x minus 9 is 21. Okay, well, what do I need to do? Backwards order of operations says usually Usually we go this way. And this is our reverse. Okay, so usually we'd go this way, but we're going to go reverse. So the reverse says we should do the adding or subtracting part first. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine the like terms. So we're going to move this -9 and this 21. We're going to put them together because they don't have x's in them. So in order to do that, we're going to add 9 to both sides. That just made a 0 pair. So this has gone to 0. Now we have 3x minus 0. Well, that's just 3x. There's nothing left there. 21 plus 9 leaves me with 30. 3x equals 30. You've done this math in your ratio section before. It's 3 times x, so we're going to divide by 3. Usually, it's the last step will often be division. If it's a two-step question, your last step will typically be a divide. So now we have x equals 30 divided by 3 leaves us with 10. And that's because this 3 and this 3 canceled out because they make that 3 over 3, which is 1. If you want to, check your answer. 3 times 10 minus 9 equals 21. Let's see. 30 minus 9 equals 21. 21 equals 21. We've got it. Okay, so that's just our check. You don't have to do a check every time, but that can be really helpful if you're somebody that's a little bit nervous about, are you doing your algebra right? We've got another one that's I call it a two-step. You could maybe argue that it's 3. These ones look really ugly because there's x's on both sides of the equal sign, but they're actually really easy. They're just as easy as the last ones. Easier than the ones with negative x, even though here it looks like we have a negative x. So what we want to do in this scenario is we want to have, we'll call it x's equals number. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to group the x's together on one side and we're going to group the number on the other side, the terms that don't have x's. We call these combining like terms. So a like term are anything that have x's. So we could think of it as if we were in a class of mixed students. Maybe I had HVAC and auto together in the class. And I say, I want all of the automotive students to go to one side of the room, all of the HVAC students to go to the other side of the room. I have grouped you by the type of students you are. In math, if you were numbers, let's say HVAC happens to be numbers without x's, auto would be numbers with x's. So we're splitting them up and we're grouping them on two separate sides. So that hopefully will give you a little bit of a visual of what we're thinking about when we're separating them. So we're going to put the x's on one side and the numbers on the other. Now, if there's a number attached in front of an x, we're going to keep that, the ones that are attached by multiplying. But this one that doesn't have an x, we want to get it together on the same side as the 63. And it doesn't matter which side of the equal sign we move to. Now, what I'm going to suggest you do is always move the smallest thing because we want to avoid negatives because negatives screw people up. When I say negatives screw people up, I almost quit university a couple of times because I missed a negative sign and I decided that I couldn't finish school. That might have been a little bit of an overreaction, but avoid negative signs if you can. It will help you out as you do your math. And you're not going to see a lot of negatives in your trade. So you should be okay. I mean, HVAC, okay, you guys can argue negative temperatures. And in auto, yes, you'll see maybe plus or minus a value, but we're going to deal with those later. So we won't see too many negatives. All right, so let's get started with this question. I want to move this negative x, that's the smallest number of x's. I'm going to move it over with this 7x. So I'm going to start with that. Plus x to both sides. This is now a 0. Now we're left with, I have 7x's plus one more x, and I'm left with 8x plus 7 equals 63. I still have a number on this side, so let's move this 7. Well, we can do that. It's 8x plus 7. To get rid of the 7, that makes it a 0 if I subtract 7. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. 8x equals 63. Take away 7 leaves me with 56. And now we're down to one of those easy questions that people like to get, where we're going to divide both sides by the coefficient in front of x, or the number in front of x. So x is equal to 7. Shall we do a check? You do not have to do the check, but we can do it. So 7 times 7 plus 7 should be equal to 63 take away 7. So let's check it. 7 times 7 is 49 plus 7. 63 take away 7 is 56. 49 plus 7 is 56. We've got it. 56 equals 56. So that's an easy way to check. If you make a mistake, let's say you had x equals 6 instead, you would find the math doesn't work because both sides aren't going to be equal. So that's why we do that little check. All right, let's do the same thing over here. Exactly the same kind of question. We want to put all the x's on one side. So I have 6x here and 4x here. Let's move the 4x because we're going to move it by subtracting the 4x. So we're taking away 4x from this side because we want the x's to go to 0. And we're going to take 4x away from this side. So now we're left with 0 x's. And we have 9 plus 2x equals 25. Now we need to move our 9. The reason I'm moving 9 and not 25 is because if I move 25 to this side, A, it doesn't help me, and B, it's going to make that 25 negative, and we're avoiding making negatives if we can. That's why I moved this 4. If I had to move the 6, I would have had to done take away 6 and take away 6 from here. 4 take away 6, I'm going to get negatives, and we don't want negatives. Pretend it's your bank account. You don't want negatives. We'll say the negatives till January, and that might be true of your bank account too if you're on student loans. That was when I found things got rough when I was a student. So we'll see if going into the negative until second semester. Hopefully you're not there already. So we'll get with a 0, 9 take away 9 leaves me 0. So now I have 2x is equal to 25 take away 9 leaves me with 16. Divide both sides by 2. And x equals 8. I'm going to let you do the check if you want to. I'm not going to do the check with you. So that's two-step questions. They're pretty easy. Combine the two sides, put the x's together, the numbers together, and then we can solve it. I'll confess, you're not going to see a huge number of these. HVAC, you will see these questions in thermodynamics second semester. For my auto crew, you're not going to see them very much at all. I will sneak in a couple of questions where we're going to use it to solve for temperature. So you'll have a couple questions that will sneak in there, but I'm going to put those ones in a separate lesson for you. So hopefully that will make that a little bit easier for you. We'll throw that in just in a short little clip, but you guys are down to just the last about 4 classes just to do a little geometry. So we're not going to spend a lot of time doing algebra. I do need you to know how to do a few of the basic pieces though. It's probably more important for my HVAC class. Unfortunately, you guys all are doing the same math, so everybody gets stuck with a little bit of the same. All right, what happens if we have brackets? Now, the math that we do here is quite similar to what you would see if you were solving a temperature equation. And we'll look at going from Celsius to Fahrenheit, similar but a little bit different. So our problems with brackets. So in order to do brackets, we're going to do what we call the distributive property. So we're going to distribute. So if I was distributing tests to the class, that means I'm handing them out to everybody in the class. They're no longer in a single pile. So I'm going to distribute numbers here. So here we have a 3 times everything inside this bracket. So I need to distribute this 3 to everything inside of the bracket, which means I'm going to do 3 times 8 and 3 times x. If you draw the lines in, you'll get it right. 3 times 8. 3 8s are 24. Plus 3 times x leaves me with 3x equals 9. Hopefully that equation looks familiar to you. We've done this kind of a question before. So you'll see the first couple that we did that were really easy, we keep coming back to the easy ones after we get rid of our brackets or the extra x's. All right, so here we want to get the x alone. So we're going to, this is one I left that has a negative in it. Sorry, guys, but it makes a really good example. So we need to get this 24 away from the 3x. So we can subtract 24. So 24, take away 24, that's a 0. So 0 plus 3x leaves me 3x equals 9, take away 24 leaves me with 15. And it's a negative 15 because I had $9 and I took away $24. So we're left with that negative 15. We're in the hole. We've hit January. So 3x equals negative 15. Now we have to split that up. So it's 3 times x. To undo that, we're going to divide. They cancel. X equals, well, negative $15. You're $15 in the hole. We're splitting it between 3 friends. Everybody is negative $5. Okay. So that's what we call distributing. Now, sometimes it looks even uglier than that because you have a question. Maybe it looks like this one. And again, we're going to distribute. So we're going to distribute in 8 plus x equals 3x plus 2. Whoops. Anybody see my mistake? I missed distributing the 3 to the 2. And I did this when I wrote up my answer key for it as well. So one of those moments where I ran into trouble. So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 2 gives me 6. Now we're down to one of those questions like we had earlier. All right, so now that we have this, let's combine things. Let's move our x first. I'm going to move the x to the other side. We'll make this a 0. So 8 equals 3x, take away x, leaves me with 2x plus 6. Let's move our 6. This is now a 0. 2 equals 2x. Divide both sides by 2. 1 is equal to x. And you can do a check if you want. These are the ones that are a little bit trickier. So I understand if it's a little more challenging for you. And then the very last one is, well, what do we do if we have a fraction? Oh, I left you 2 with fractions. So I've got 2 left. This gives a little bit of everything, and then I'll do a second one that has a little bit of the more complicated ones that you might have some more trouble with. So, okay, what do we do here? So this one, hopefully you can think ratios. There's 2 ways to do this question. So if you think ratio, it can help us out. X over 3 equals 9. Well, 9 is the same as 9 over 1. And I've given you this before in your ratio questions. Remember, we cross multiply x times 1 and 9 times 3. So if we cross multiply, 1x is equal to 9 times 3. X is equal to 27. So that's one way to do that question. The other way to think of it is that we have x divided by 3 equals 9. What's the opposite of division? It's multiplication. So we could just think of it as, well, I'm undoing division, so we're going to multiply. 3 on the top over here, 3 on the bottom. X equals 9 times 3. And we still get x equals 27. So two methods to do it. This is the ratio method. And this is, I'll call, I guess both of them are algebra methods. Okay, so this is more thinking about undoing the math. Now the question, so that's pretty easy. You've done this one, so we don't have to do a whole lot of examples of that. This is one of the questions that people mess up a lot. But if you think of it like a ratio, it's really easy. So let's put the 1 under the 3. Cross multiplying, top times bottom, leaves me 42, equals 3x. Well, that's pretty easy. Divide both sides by 3. X equals 42 divided by 3 leaves us with, I did calculate it somewheres. Oh, there it is. I just swapped my sheet number, 14. Okay. So that's pretty easy. If you think ratios, it makes it really easy for us to solve. The other way to do this question is to think, okay, 3 equals 42 divided by x. Okay. The other way to think of this is x is on the bottom. When x is on the bottom, it's the same as 1 over x. We don't like fractions, so let's get rid of them. Multiply both sides by x equals, cancel those out, 3x or x3 equals 42, divide by 3, and x still equals 14. So you'll notice we get the same process no matter which way to do it. I think this probably is my favorite. This is maybe easiest. Okay, so that's maybe the easiest just because you're less likely to make a mistake because you're good at ratios so far. At least I hope you are. Your quizzes were good. So I hope that means you really understood it and you didn't just have a friend do it for you. No, soon enough. All right, I've got 2 more questions for you, and that's it. These 2 are probably the two most complicated questions, but they're also the 2 easiest questions. They just look nasty. So let's look at them. First one is x divided by 4 minus 8 equals 3. What does x need to be? This is one where typically you'd have to do some algebra to kind of think through it. It's a little harder to do in your head. Well, this is all connected to x, okay? X divided by 4, this is one term because it's connected to an x. This doesn't have any x's connected to it, and this has no x's connected to it. So let's do that combining like terms. If we combine things, usually it makes it look nicer. So let's do that. Take away x, we'll counter that with a plus x. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So this just went to a 0. X over 4 equals 3 plus 8 gives me 11. Hopefully you're going, aha, that's an easy question, because it should be. This is one of those ratio questions. Let's put the 1 on the bottom of the 11. Or you could think of it as x divided by 4. You undo the 4 with multiplication. Let's think of it that way for now. I can't always give you 2 versions just because it would take way too long to do your lesson. So x divided by 4, the opposite of dividing is multiply. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Times 4. X equals 44. And you could do a quick check if you want to plug your numbers back in. I often put boxes around my answer just because, well, it makes it easy for you to see where I finished. And the very last question for you. This one looks nasty because it's got fractions in it. Remember what I said about getting rid of your fraction early if you can? Now here, we couldn't get rid of the fraction at the beginning because only x was part of the fraction. But if we pop over to this question, this whole thing is divided by 4. It's like having brackets around it. Remember we did that with order of operations. We said if everything on the top, if there's a fraction line that goes across everything on top, then it means we have to solve the whole top first before we do the division. This is the same kind of question. It's like hidden brackets, but we're undoing the math. So we need to think about BEDMAS backwards. So if we're undoing the math, that means brackets are going to be the last thing that we undo here, unless you really want to get ugly with some of the fraction parts. So we're undoing our math. Let's get rid of our fraction first. So we're going to multiply by 4 on both sides. Okay, that gets rid of this 4. And now we have 4 times 3 is 12 equals x plus 2. Because there's no fraction any further. Now it's a nice easy question. Subtract 2 from both sides. 10 equals x. And that has us all finished. I know those last few questions are maybe a little bit tricky. So I'm going to leave you with some practice questions. There's a practice worksheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a second video and I'll post that a little bit later this morning. That will have you a few extra examples because this just kind of covered a little bit of everything. Where will you see it? This question, where will you see this? You will see this, an example of this question would be area equals big B plus little b divided by 2 times height. This is a question that we'd have to be able to solve for a trapezoid. You're not going to do rearranging with it quite as much, but that kind of rearranging problem solving will actually help us out. This is the equation for the area of a trapezoid, which is a shape like this. I always think it kind of looks like a windshield. Okay, so that's that particular shape. Another place you could see similar type of question would be in a similar type question would be working with triangles. So you have a few types of questions there, but that just gives us kind of a little introduction to rearranging some equations. And hopefully I didn't overwhelm you and you're able to get through the worksheet and the little assignment.